is there. Oh yeah, you're there. Oh hi, hello. My name is Debi Gilori and I'd like to welcome you to the Paisley Book Festival 2022. I'm here because I'm a writer and an illustrator, and I wanted to talk to you about my newest book, which is called, here it is, A Cat Called Waverley, which I wrote and illustrated, which means I did the pictures inside as well as telling the story. But before I do that, I thought, seeing as how you're here, I can't normally do this when I go into schools, but this is rather good because I'm doing this from home. So I can show you this place that I'm sitting in. This is where I work. This is where I go every single day to do my job. And it's brilliant because, I know it doesn't look brilliant. It looks like a bit of a pit, but it's just down the garden from my house, which means that I don't have to travel very far to work. It also means if I really want to, I can pitch up at work in my PJs, which is just absolutely bliss. Today, because we're having a chat, I thought I'd better not wear my PJs to work and try and look like a proper grown-up. But let me show you, this is something I can't normally do. Let me show you, this is my shed that I call my international shed quarters, which is a bit silly, but this is where I work. So you can see behind me there's great big white windows that have got blinds down them. That's so that I get lots of light falling on my work. And here, oops, how do we do this? Can you see? Down there. This is the desk that I work at. So there's loads of pictures and there's lots and lots of brushes, and here are some of the paints that I use. I don't know, can you see those? Yeah, there we go. And this is basically where I make my books, every single one of my books. And it's just a sort of glorified garden shed, absolutely, as you can probably see, crammed full of things. It's not very big, but it's big enough. Excellent. So in this shed, I've made over 70 picture books, some of which you might know. I don't know. Do you know this book, The Trouble with Dragons? I'm quite fond of this book. This book is all about climate warming. I don't know. Do you know this book? Scariest Thing of All? This book is all about the power of our own imaginations. And this book, I think you might know this one. What's Time, Mr. Wolf? I'll try and hold it level. There we go. This is really about telling the time. And it's also about Mr. Wolf having a birthday. This book is about a very unlikely mummy and baby, because the dragon is the mummy and the little penguin is the baby. And it's their story. This book is sort of like a countdown to bedtime, where you say goodnight to absolutely every single thing in the world. And this book, well, you might know this book because there have been an awful lot of people who have this book. And this book is about love between a big person and a little person, between a parent and a child. It's about love that goes on forever. So I love my job. I'm really very, very lucky to be able to do this, to be able to work in my little shed. And if anyone had said to me when I was in primary school, if anyone had said, Debbie, do you know you're going to be able to, your job when you grow up is going to be drawing pictures and telling stories, I would go, wow, what? Really? God, that sounds really cool. Because I can't imagine anything I'd rather be doing. I just love drawing pictures. And what I do when I'm trying to come up with an idea for a book, I've got lots of these sketchbooks. These are where my ideas start, and I'll just sit and I'll scribble in them, and I'll do drawings, and who knows what comes out. I mean, this is a ridiculous picture of a dragon setting fire to something. A little girl running away. What have we got here? Let's see. More pictures. Got a little girl who's found a baby dragon. Look, the dragon's got a nappy on. Who knew that dragons needed nappies? And although these seem like really inconsequential pictures, and sort of, I love this one. I've never managed to turn this into a book, but I would really love to. It's about a little girl and her baby brother, and her baby brother is a gingerbread baby. And she loves it, loves her little brother so much. She loves him to bits, literally. She loves him so much. She gives him a great big hug and his head falls off. Unsurprisingly, I haven't managed to turn that into a picture book yet, but I'm still working on it because I am sure it could be quite an interesting book. I quite like this. What could possibly go wrong? Imagine raising a baby elephant in your house. It's a very little elephant. It's wearing a nappy as well to show how little it is. And it's just put its trunk in her painting water. I wonder what will happen next. So it's these kind of things in books like this. That's where I get my ideas from. I just draw things and then I try and wrap a story around them. And I have to tell you, I have the best job in the world. Can you imagine doing that every single day? And people pay me to do it. Wow, amazing. Anyway, without any further ado, let's find out what my new book, A Cat Called Waverley, is all about. One of the things people always ask me when I have a new book is, what's it about? As if you can sum up the whole of a book in a couple of sentences. And so, what is A Cat Called Waverley all about? Well, it's, does it begin with a war? Is that what the book is about? Is it about a war in a foreign place and the people who fight in it? Well, yes, partly. But it is also about a city in flux, a city that is changing all of the time, where buildings are being knocked down and new buildings are being built. Like Edinburgh is like that. And it's also about Waverley, the station, as the title would have you believe. And it's also about a cat called Waverley. And here he is as a little kitten with his mummy. But it's also about a person. And in the book, I've called the person Donald. But in actual fact, this book is quite special because it's about a real person who was called Darren Greenfield, and he lived in Edinburgh. Unlike all of us here today, everyone we know, Darren started off life as a little baby, like all of these little babies in this picture. And who knows what these babies will grow up to be? Who knows what shape their lives will take? One thing is for sure, they will not all live the same life. Every life is so very different. But this life, Darren's life in particular, I wanted to put it in a book. So I made a book for him. And this is the book. So I'm going to read you the story of A Cat Called Waverley. Then I'm going to tell you a little bit about how I did the pictures in it and how it came about. So let's begin. Here's the front cover. A Cat Called Waverley. And when you open the book, the first picture that you see is this. And this picture has no words attached because it's an end paper. So it's one of the first pictures in the book. And it has this little kitten chasing leaves. And leaves are a theme that run through the book. Have a look and see how many times you can spot leaves. They sort of unify the book, they move the story onwards, and they also show the passage of time. The story begins with leaves and it ends with leaves. But most of all, this is the story of a cat called Waverley. Born in a park, Waverley learned how to run, how to hunt, how to run from danger, and how to make friends. Lots of friends. Every day, Waverley had breakfast with a postman in Morningside, lunch with old Mrs. McKinnon and her kitties in Corstorphine, afternoon tea with the soldiers at Edinburgh Castle. But best of all, supper, a hug, and a warm bed for the night with his best friend, Donald. And there, you can see Waverley and Donald together, and Waverley looks very happy, cuddled into Donald. And Donald, as you can see, is quite young and doesn't have lots of money because this is his room, this is his house where Waverley visits, and it's not a very big room that he has. But you can also see Donald probably plays those guitars that are in the corner of his room. And Donald's also possibly just had tea, as has Waverley. You can see Waverley's bowl is next to Donald's bowl. And I think if you look very carefully, you can see Donald had spaghetti loops for supper. And they look very happy together. Supper, a hug, and a warm bed for the night with your best friend. That sounds pretty good. This happy life went on for many years, until one day Donald had to go far, far away. And in the next few pictures, I was trying to tell a story without putting it into words. I was trying to tell the story of a young man who was a musician who played on the streets of Edinburgh for passing people and hoped that people would put money in his little bowl. And when you play in the streets of Edinburgh, or any city, you have to put up with the weather. And as time passes through the year, the weather gets colder and colder. And you can see Donald here, still playing in the autumn with his bowl. And his trousers have got a hole in the knee, and there are leaves coming down, so it's definitely autumn. And then it's winter. Donald's patched his trousers, or somebody's put a patch in his trousers, and there's even less money in his bowl, but he's still smiling in the snow. And I had him wearing a sort of Santa beard, because sometimes the young musicians who play in the streets of Edinburgh and any city get dressed up at Christmas, pretend to be Santa Claus or one of his elves. So there's Donald there. But after Christmas, it's January and February, and these are cold and difficult and miserable months, especially in the north, in a northern city like Edinburgh, where it's very cold and it rains a lot. And here is Donald still outside in the streets looking a bit chilly. And there's very little money in his bowl, and there's a big puddle, and somebody has put a piece of paper in his bowl instead of money. And here is Donald reading what is on the piece of paper. And you can see he's signing something there. He's signing something for a man in an army uniform with that mascot or insignia in the background, that big sort of starry thing, which I think is the insignia of the army. And it looks like Donald is signing up in the army. So one day, Donald had to go far, far away, so far away that Waverley couldn't come too. Waverley tried to stow away in Donald's kit bag, but that didn't work. Waverley tried to stop Donald leaving, but that didn't work either. Poor Waverley. Poor Donald too. "Cat," said Donald, "you have to stay here. My flatmates will look after you while I'm away." But Waverley didn't understand what Donald was saying. Waverley wanted Donald to stay. He told Donald this, but Donald didn't understand a word. Waverley said. Waverley followed Donald until he could follow no further, for even a cat can't keep up with a train. And there's that poor little cat left behind as Donald goes off on a train to go to be a soldier. Poor Waverley. I wonder what he was feeling. So at this point, the story splits into two because there's two of them and they both go in very, very different directions. Waverley is left behind in Edinburgh and Donald goes off to be a soldier. So poor Waverley. What would he do without his best friend? And one by one, his other friends disappeared. A new postman came to Morningside and he didn't like cats. Old Mrs. McKinnon moved away and all her kitties vanished. And next we find out what happened to Donald, but there are no words. It's for you to work out what the story is. But this, I was trying to draw a far-off foreign place, the kind of place where people go, where soldiers go to fight wars. I was trying to imagine what it was like to be there. And I thought that Donald would probably fly in by helicopter because that's often how soldiers arrive at a new place to go and fight. And here is Donald in the helicopter. And you can tell it's Donald because you can just see his freckles. And he doesn't look very happy. He looks a bit apprehensive about being there, which is understandable. Flying in a helicopter and not knowing what's going to happen when you arrive must be quite scary. And he's arrived now. The helicopter's down. And there's Donald, second soldier in, looking around him, wondering what sort of place he has come to. Because he's never been a soldier before. This is all new to him. And there are sounds and smells and things to see that he has never seen before. And next, the story goes back to Waverley. Poor Waverley. Postman's gone, old Mrs. McKinnon has gone. And one day at the castle, there was a huge bang from the 1 o'clock gun, and Waverley never went back. The 1 o'clock gun goes bang every single day in Edinburgh, and people who live in Edinburgh are used to it and they don't jump. But sometimes if you've never been to Edinburgh before and you're on Princes Street quite near the castle, because they fire the gun, it's a huge gun like a big cannon, and they fire it from the castle and it's so loud it makes people jump. And you can tell who lives in Edinburgh, who's used to it and who isn't, because the people who aren't used to it, who haven't been there before, jump at 1 o'clock. But the people who live there, they ignore it, or they have a look at their watches. They check their watches just to make sure it's 1 o'clock. So if you are in Edinburgh near the castle at 1 o'clock and you hear the gun go off with a big bang, have a look at the people and you'll be able to tell who is a tourist and who is a local. So there was a huge bang from the 1 o'clock gun and Waverley never went back because he doesn't know. But worst of all, Donald's house was knocked down and, just like that, Waverley was homeless. He had nowhere to go. Poor cat. And meanwhile, Donald is not having a good time either. Here he is. helping carry a stretcher. And I put I had two little pictures dropped into that warlike background. And the top one is this. And it's Donald looking shocked and sad and frightened and standing at a grave. But it's not just one grave. It's hundreds, thousands. All the young people who have been killed in wars and are buried in this graveyard. Poor them. Poor Donald. And as there are in many of the pictures in this book, there are leaves swirling around, showing that time passes. Seasons pass. So meanwhile, back in Edinburgh, Waverley has nowhere to go. But Edinburgh is full of places for a cat to live, and there is no shortage of people who love cats. However, Waverley didn't want to live anywhere without Donald. Home was where Donald was, wherever that might be. So Waverley went to the station and waited and waited and waited. Because, of course, the station was the last place that he saw Donald. So it's logical that the cat would go back to the station thinking that maybe Donald would reappear there. Because he couldn't go back to Donald's house, because Donald's house didn't exist anymore. It had been knocked down. Soon, people began to notice the lonely little cat on platform 2 at Waverley Station. They called him Waverley because they thought that was his home. But Waverley knew home was where Donald was, wherever that might be. People took photographs and brought food for him, but even though he was desperately lonely, Waverley wouldn't let anyone pick him up. Nobody, that is, except Donald. And you can see, maybe you didn't know this bench, this metal bench that Waverley is sitting on, it's a real bench at Waverley Station. You can go there and sit on it too. It's a bench that's been put there in memory of the soldiers who died in the First World War. So it seemed, in my imagination, like a good place to have Waverley sit and wait for his friend to return from war. So Waverley is living now at Waverley Station. And the station master allowed Waverley to sleep in his warm office overnight. And there's Waverley tucked up in a cardboard box under the station manager's desk. And the cleaners shared their breakfast with him. So he had a warm place to sleep and he had some food. But best of all, once a week, a kindly train driver let Waverley help her drive the train. Together, they travelled up to the Highlands and back. Waverley peered out of the window, wondering where Donald had gone. Was he in that forest? On top of that mountain? And you can see that time is passing. I wanted to show the passage of time. I wanted to show that Waverley waits and waits for such a long time. So in this picture, it's winter, and you can tell it's winter. I've put picture clues in with snow outside the window, and also the train driver's flask, because you carry a flask sometimes in the winter with soup in it, whereas in the summer, there's sunshine outside, there's no snow, and the train driver is having a terribly healthy salad. So, and then to show that years went by, I did this. Waverley missed his best friend more and more with each passing season. And I meant that to be spring. And summer, when the tourists come to Edinburgh. And autumn, when the children go back to school and the leaves come off the trees. And winter, when it snows and the leaves have fallen completely. Waverley waited and waited, missing his best friend more and more with each passing season. This went on for many years, until one day, on his way to platform 2, Waverley heard a familiar voice. "Spare change," the voice said. "Spare a few pence for the homeless." And there, sitting at the top of the station steps, was Donald. And Waverley ran, weaving through feet, dodging suitcases, until at last he was in front of his friend. "Meow!" he yelled, and he jumped onto Donald's lap, purring and turning in circles and winding his tail round and round like a furry propeller. People stopped and stared. Nobody had ever seen Waverley do that before. "Look," they said. "That must be the man who belongs to Waverley." "Wow," said Waverley. "I'm so glad you're home." But there was something wrong with Donald. His face was all wet, and Waverley could hardly understand a word his friend was saying. But it didn't matter. It didn't matter one single bit. As he curled up in Donald's lap, Waverley knew he was home at last. And that's the last picture in the book of Waverley with the leaves. So that's the end of the story. I hope you enjoyed it. But here are some of the sort of background bits to it. What I used to do the drawings in this book, because they're drawings made on paper, they're not made on a computer, and I used the oldest drawing material known to man, which is charcoal. And charcoal is made from burnt twigs, basically. And if you've ever used it, you'll know what gorgeous black smudgy stuff it is. It's like the softest chalk imaginable, and it gets your fingers really, really black, but it's just so lovely to draw with it. It's so soft and sort of crumbly, and it makes for a gorgeous range of greys and blacks. And in this rather messy picture, you can see lots of little bits of charcoal and lots of Q-tips or cotton buds. And I use the cotton buds to sort of smudge bits of charcoal around, rather than just using the ends of my fingers, which are a bit blunt and stubby. I use cotton buds to do that. And also those long grey cardboard tubes, I use those to smudge charcoal around. And it's a sort of messy procedure, and I end up, covered in black charcoal. But if I'm careful, and I also rub out the bits that I don't like, I can get pictures that are, well, you've just seen lots of them, and you wouldn't actually know that they were sort of made with this messy, messy stuff. So I used charcoal, and I also used orange and red and yellow chalk to get the colours of Waverley, and to make Waverley stand out, but also to make Donald stand out. I made Donald red-headed with freckles so that he would stand out from all the other people that were in the book. So when I first started drawing it, I thought I would draw Donald and Waverley and all the people with a sort of black line round them. And then I did this drawing and I thought, doesn't really work. I don't think I want that black line. I prefer it to be sort of slightly more like a painting. So here's Waverley with his mummy. And then when I'd begun to do the book, I wondered if we would have Waverley's thoughts as sort of cartoon bubbles, but I didn't actually think, given that we were talking about war and about somebody being homeless on the streets of Edinburgh, I didn't really think that was a very good idea. So this picture never made it into the book, which is a shame because I really quite liked it. That big round circle at the bottom that says lifts with an arrow and a little diagram to show a lift. Waverley Station had those all over the floor to direct people towards where the lifts were. And I imagined Waverley in the station having a wee think to himself. And of course, he can't read lifts. But in his mind, he's thinking of footprints instead of lifts. So it's cat prints. And then there's a big question mark because he doesn't know where Donald has gone. So he's asking, where is he? And there's a heart underneath because Waverley loves Donald very, very much. And in the little diagram, instead of a lift, it's meant to be Waverley and Donald. And Waverley has come in. You can see where the arrow is. He's come in the cat flap. And there's Donald, and he's holding a tin, which I imagine to be a tin of cat food. And there's an arrow under that, pointing into Waverley's bowl. So that's Waverley's version of the sticker in Waverley Station that directs you to the lifts. Now, to get everything right, because Edinburgh is a city that many, many people recognise, and if I'd drawn the buildings wrong, people would know and they would say, or they'd write me letters saying, "Dear Debi Gilori, your drawings are rubbish and it looks nothing like Edinburgh." So I knew that I would have to be quite accurate in drawing Edinburgh City and its well-known buildings, especially Waverley Station, because of course the book is set in Waverley Station. So I took loads and loads of photographs and did my drawings, sort of, from the photographs. So this was one of the photographs that I took of the main entrance to Waverley Station with that weird sort of wave thing, which is the canopy under which you can sort of walk into the sort of shopping arcade near the station. And the big hotel behind it, the Balmoral, which is very well known as well. But it's got thousands of windows. And I just thought, oh no, I just can't be bothered to do all those windows. And I wouldn't do them properly. So I did a sort of artist's impression that gives you the impression of that scene. It's like that scene, but it's not super, super accurate because I really wanted Waverley to be the background, Waverley Station to be the background. But the main thing in that drawing, the thing I wanted you to focus on as a reader, and the thing I wanted you to see more than anything was the cat. So here he is, and you can see how he really stands out. And in the background, your brain is taking in the fact that it's Edinburgh and it's Waverley Station and it's, the Balmoral Hotel, blah, blah, blah. But the most important bit in that picture is Waverley. And I really enjoyed using such a limited colour palette of just charcoal blacks and greys and chalk. And the chalk really sings, and you can see that the chalk works, the orange chalk and yellow chalk works really hard. It really carries a lot of the story. So in this picture of Waverley inside the station master's office at night, it's a very different picture without the chalk. When you put the chalk in, instantly it makes more sense. The light is on, the cat's asleep, and your eye is immediately drawn to them both. Sometimes using a really limited colour palette can be very, very effective. And the most difficult picture for me to draw in the entire book, because I'm actually not any good at drawing buildings or trains or any of that stuff. And when I first wrote the story, I thought, oh, how am I going to do that bit? How on earth am I going to illustrate Waverley Steps? And Waverley Steps, for those of you who are in Edinburgh, you may want to go and try walking up and down them. They're very steep. But not only are they very steep, take it from me, they're very hard to draw. So I left this drawing in the book till the very end because I was dreading doing it so much. But actually, once I started, it was really like a sort of maths problem. It wasn't as hard to do as I thought. But the perspectives where you have the sort of vanishing lines going upwards, receding away from your eye, they were quite tricky. But then I thought, actually, nobody's really going to be very interested in the Waverley Steps, just like you weren't particularly interested in Waverley Station and the Balmoral Hotel. They are the backdrop. They're just the scenery. The most important things in this picture are the cat and Donald up at the top of the stairs. So as long as I got everything else roughly right, your eye would almost tune them out and focus on Waverley the cat and Donald at the top of the steps. So I'll just show you here how I built this drawing up. And you can see it's very rough in this picture, and you can see through the cat and the people. But as I slowly build it up, it starts to make more sense. And here's this man walking down the steps, looking at his phone. That's such risky behaviour. And there we go. More and more is getting filled in. And we're almost there. And of course, again, the whole picture comes together when the colour goes in. Just look. There. And immediately you spot Waverley and the linking theme that runs through the book of the leaves that draw your eye up the steps to where Donald sits at his pitch at the top of Waverley Steps. Just like the real man, Darren Greenfield, that this book is about. That was where he was. That was where he would sit through winter and spring and summer and autumn for years and years, because he was homeless and because he'd come back from a war in a far-off place, and the things he'd seen and the things he'd done changed him so much that he couldn't go back to the life he led before he went to war. Now, the cover of the book. Covers are a funny thing, because a cover has to do such a lot of heavy lifting, because the cover is all that people see when the book is in a bookshop or a library or a book festival or wherever. The cover is how you decide immediately whether you're going to have a look at the book or pass on by. And the cover has to do such a lot of work. It has to look appealing. It has to almost give you a snapshot of what the book is about. And it has to pique your interest and your curiosity enough so that you go, oh, I wonder what that's about. So initially we were going to have Waverley, the cat, on the front cover with a train going down the tunnel, which is an important moment in the book when Waverley is abandoned. That's the point where the two stories of Waverley and Donald go in different directions. And I like this drawing, Waverley looking utterly miserable as the train goes away, but it doesn't say anything about war. It doesn't sum it up. It's really just a cat and a train. You've got no idea what that's about. So we decided we wouldn't go with that cover, and we tried a different approach. And we had Waverley on the First World War commemorative bench inside Waverley Station with this little girl who ever so conveniently just happened to have a can of cat food to hand to feed Waverley, and Waverley's going, no thanks, I don't let anyone feed me apart from Donald. But this didn't seem right, and as somebody pointed out, well, you can't have little girls on their own in Waverley Station, apparently. So we couldn't do this cover. So we ended up with a young guy sitting on the bench, not offering cat food, but just reaching out to stroke Waverley. But Waverley doesn't want stroked, because that young guy isn't Donald. Now, you don't know any of that when you're picking up the book for the first time. But when you put it together with the writing and the leaves on the quarter spine, all together, it kind of makes you wonder, what is this book about? Well, you now know what this book is about because you've heard me read the story. And I hope you've enjoyed listening to it as much as I enjoyed making it. Okay, so some of you have sent me in some questions which I'm going to try and answer. And the first question is, this is a question I actually do get asked quite a lot, and it is, of all my books, all the books that I've written and illustrated, which one is my favourite and why? Now, that is a really difficult question to answer because it's almost like, this is going to sound really daft, but it's almost like my books are my children. I put so much time and thought and love into making them that once I've actually got one and I'm holding it in my hands, I do love it to bits. And it's not really fair to take one of my books and compare it to all the others and then say, well, this one is my favourite because yada yada, blah blah blah. Mainly because it's a bit like trying to make a comparison between oranges and skyscrapers. They're nothing like each other. Yes, they actually have a physical form. You can pick up an orange or you can touch an orange and it feels, orange-like. You can touch a skyscraper, it feels like a skyscraper. But there the resemblance stops. They're nothing like each other. And to say, well, I much prefer oranges to skyscrapers sounds a bit daft because there's nothing to compare them to. You can't eat a skyscraper. You can't go and live in an orange. I don't know if I'm making any sense here. So I think what I'm trying to say is that I feel that I probably shouldn't have any favourites, just as I have 5 children and I don't have a favourite child amongst the 5, because that would be desperately unfair, wouldn't it? But I suppose the books that were... There are some books that I have made that I made at a point in my life where the books were very, very important to me. So, because of that, they become special. They don't become my favourites, but they do become books that really mean a great deal to me. So, for instance, I would say, No Matter What is really important to me. It has some pictures in it that I just absolutely love. Like this one is of, I don't know if you can see the little, so back to front, little fox in bed with the big fox, and the big fox looks like she's probably fast asleep. She's been reading a story to the little fox, and like all exhausted parents the world over, she has fallen asleep before the little one has fallen asleep, and he is still wide awake in the darkness, and he is worrying. You can see from the look in his face, he is worried. Now, I don't know if you ever have nights like that, but I know that I do. I most definitely sometimes am awake in the darkness, thinking dark thoughts. And this book kind of talks about that, because the little fox is really worried that the big fox will stop loving him if he continues to behave really, really badly, and he just can't help himself. There he is. He's turned himself into a caterpillar, and he is drinking his tomato soup through his nose. Now, I don't know if you've ever done that at dinner. I really hope you haven't done that at dinner. But you can see the mummy fox, or the parent fox here, is looking just a little bit like, oh dear, what's going to happen next? And it's a book about how the big fox, no matter what the little fox does, the big fox will always love it. And it's a really reassuring book. And when I wrote it, I didn't know that I needed that reassurance. I didn't know that I needed to be told that I would be loved no matter what I did. I wrote it for one of my children who was having a very difficult time at the time that I wrote it. And I wrote it for her to cheer her up and to let her know, kind of indirectly, that I would love her forever, as I love all her other siblings, her brothers and sisters. So I am very, very fond of No Matter What. And I'm also now, have I got it? Where is it? Oh no, I haven't got it here. Well, I'm also very, very fond of Goodnight World, because it's just the same kind of thing. It's not about love, but it's just about tucking everything up at night and making sure that everything is snugly tucked away before you go to sleep. A lot of my books are set at night because a lot of the time these kind of books, picture books, are read to small people late at night before they go to sleep. And this is one of them. And it's got all the things that I love about nighttime on it. On the cover, these two houses with lit windows in the dark. I've always loved that. I don't know what it is about the sight of little golden windows shining in the darkness, but there's something so very, very pleasing about that. I love this picture as well. Is it all right for me to say that I love my own pictures? I mean, I did do this picture, but until I actually put it on paper, I didn't know I was going to love it so much, and I didn't know that it was going to look like this. And lo and behold, it looks like this. And I just really love the idea of taking your little dog out for a last walk in the dark, a last pee before bedtime, and looking up at a tree, and there in the tree is an owl reading a good night story to all the other birds. It's just very, very, very lovely. So that wasn't much of an answer. I think I'm really saying I don't really have a favourite. Maybe you have a favourite. Do you have a favourite book? I would love to think that one of your favourite books was something that I made, but that's possibly me just being silly. And there's one more question, which is, which book did I enjoy writing the most? Now, that's possibly a question that might be missing a trick because I do both things. I write the books and I also draw the pictures, and those are two very, very different things. Writing a book feels completely different to illustrating it. I have to say that illustrating it is a walk in the park compared to writing it. I find when I'm trying to write a story, sometimes it is like dragging my own teeth out of my head with a rusty pair of pliers. It's difficult. And there are days when I can spend weeks actually trying desperately hard to write just one sentence. Because the thing about these books, about picture books, is that you can't put very much in them. They have to be very, very short. They have to have not many words in them, which means that every single word that is in the book has to work incredibly hard. You can't put in any extras. So that means that your focus when you're writing the stories has to be diamond laser sharp, while you're also at the same time trying to keep your mind wide, wide open so that ideas will pour into it and pour out of it without too much effort. Unsurprisingly, that is incredibly hard to do. It really is. So I would say the books that would be my favourite that I've written, the books that I've enjoyed writing the most are the books that have come really, really easily, and they are quite few and far between. One of them was What's the Time, Mr. Wolf? And it's very, very simple. The idea behind it, gosh, I can't hold it straight. The idea behind this book, it's really just going through a day with Mr. Wolf and asking the question every so often, what's time, Mr. Wolf? So for instance, here we go, it's 10 o'clock in the morning. Mr. Wolf is trimming the hairs on his chinny chin when his phone rings. Now, it's not deathless prose, but it's just such a lovely kind of structure in a book to have time passing. So you go from 10 o'clock to 11 o'clock to... So at 11 o'clock, he's in his garden. There he is. And, oops, there he is there. And he's... no, there he is there. And he's digging in his garden because, of course, it's 11 o'clock, time for 11sies. And then at 12 o'clock, well, what do you think? At 12 o'clock, midday, he has to go shopping because his cupboard was bare. He discovered that in the previous picture. And it just goes... It was just so easy to write. But there's another question there, because the other question is, which book did I enjoy illustrating the most? And that is probably the one that I'm working on at the moment, whichever book that is, because each time I've finished writing a story, I then get to illustrate it. And I just love illustrating so much. I love painting pictures. So every time I start to illustrate a new book, I think, oh, this is just, it's my most favourite book. I've never done a book I've loved quite as much as this. So at the moment, the book that I am doing, I can't actually show you it because I've just sent off all the pictures to my publisher, so I don't really have anything left except for a couple of scribbles on the wall. And it's a book called Wilma the Brave, about a little Viking girl. And I think, like all my books, it began in a sketchbook. And I worked out what Wilma would look like by drawing and drawing and drawing in the sketchbook until I found a little girl, a very little girl. Can you see how difficult it is for Wilma to hold the big sword and the big shield and wear the big helmet? Because all the Viking paraphernalia is built for big men, not for little girls. And every time this poor little girl tries to do something brave, her horrendous big brothers just laugh at her. Look at them. They just think she's hilarious because she's just a girl. So it's all about being massively brave while you're also just a very little girl. You can see there is Wilma fighting off an absolutely terrifying sock monster, which is where the book begins. And later on, I had to work out the cover for Wilma and do loads and loads of sort of sketches, because covers are quite difficult to do as well. But I just loved it because doing new illustrations that I have never in my life done before is just an absolute joy. Think of this. We all have these amazing pictures in our head. Every single one of us that walks the earth has an imagination inside their head that produces the most amazing pictures. And sometimes we try and describe these pictures to each other. We say, oh, last night I had a dream, and in the dream there was this absolutely huge, terrifying monster, and it was made of socks, and it rose up out of Loch Ness, and it came, and you can see it when you're telling your friends or your mum and dad or whoever this story. But the only way that you can actually share just what that terrible, terrible sock monster looked like is by drawing it. There is no other way to get the pictures inside your head out so that everybody can see them. Until we invent a USB slot at the back of our necks that we can plug a lead into and download the pictures inside our head straight onto a screen, the only way that we can ever get them out is by being an artist or an illustrator. So there you go. I have the best job in the world, I reckon. Thank you for coming and listening to me at the Paisley Book Festival. Bye.